right now I'm just analyzing this stuff, and we got UAPs at least on a thermal. In some way, the whole group of 200 people became like one large creature or organism, and they formed a circle, held hands, and did the chant in an accelerated way. And they reported seeing old motherships and vortexes. Two people saw each other as soulmates and ran off together, had a large impact on everybody. And this is what the ancient presence is doing to keep the mystery alive.
There is nothing wrong with your podcast streaming service. We now control your device. This is not a test. This is podcast of the paranormal. Close your curtains and stay away from your windows. Lock your doors, turn off your lights. Get your snacks and drinks ready. Get to your basement or attic. The podcast is about to begin.
Hello, everyone. We are here today with Meyer and Mark Reeder. They are filmmakers and authors, and we have an exciting conversation for you. So, Ron and Mark, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into this field.
So I got into filmmaking by accident. I was doing research back a long time ago when public television, public radio were coming into existence. And I got kind of tired of publishing scientific papers with 20 people would read. And the opportunity arose to produce radio programs and television programs that there was no peer review, and maybe, 10,000, sometimes millions of people would see what I was doing. And so it rolled on from there. That was in Wisconsin. And then I moved to Colorado, where the cable industry arose and became a major player in the rise of cable. And then I sold my library, and then eventually I was asked to do a series on Bigfoot of all things, which my daughter wanted to do. And that was my introduction to the paranormal experience. I had been a meditator and practiced martial arts, and I was looking for the truth, but in a very narrow silo. It was during this process that I met Mark on the mat, as it were. Go ahead, Mark.
So Ron and I met in martial art called Keto, and we got to know each other pretty well, training together. I was a fledgling writer trying to become a talent of some kind. Ron was looking for somebody to help him with his educational videos, and he knew I had studied history as well as political science at the University of South Dakota and then at the University of Cincinnati. So he brought me in for an interview, liked what I said, and we collaborated. We've probably done over 1,000 educational videos together, several documentaries. And then Ron got approached by a large media company to do a perspective on Bigfoot, and this is where I hand it back to Ron.
So when I was doing this series, it's called Chasing Bigfoot. Still plays on all the streaming platforms. I did a lot of interviews, what are called experiences, people who have some sort of contact experience with Bigfoot, which ranges from visuals to smells to rocks being thrown at them, footprints. And they would tell these stories, and I would, use them in the series. And I was convinced that they were not making it up. And that was a bit befuddling to me because I interviewed one person who's nearby in Colorado here, and he had heard these stories of Bigfoot just kind of disappearing into nowhere multiple times. And he runs the Sasquatch Outpost, and he came to the conclusion that it just can't be a biological entity of Earth's lineage of primates or humanoids. And he thought they had to be interdimensional or coming through a portal or something like that. You didn't have any real basis for any scientific explanation, but it was good enough at the time to get me thinking about, well, what if that were true? And so when I was a kid, I read a lot of science fiction, and I was obsessed with astronomy. I built my own telescope, and I even put some weird contraption in my attic and hoped that would trigger a UFO, and I'd run up and greet it. And the way I explore things is do make a movie about it. So I did the Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed, where I looked into that from many different angles. And it became one of the most successful streaming documentary films of all time on multiple platforms. And it helped a lot of people who, at that particular time, which was pre-COVID, that if they talked about either their UFO or other unusual experiences or Bigfoot, that they'd be ridiculed, and they never talked about them ever, usually, because they just feared the consequences. And so it opened the door for people to talk about these things, which is still what we're doing right now. Do you agree, Mark?
Absolutely.
So, and Mark was one of these people I kind of needed to open the door for. Talk about how he came from a different perspective. And again, martial arts, and it was a martial art that had a spiritual component. It had a mystical founder, but I don't think he ever did meditation or any of the other things that I did, during my career.
So Ron had done this movie, the Bigfoot Alien Connection Revisited. Before that, he and I had written several novels together, as well as short stories. So we knew how each other worked together writing. And I helped him in some of the films that he had produced. Came to me with this because he knew I was a skeptic, and I would bring a different perspective in looking at what was going on. So we collaborated on 2 books about Bigfoot and UAPs and other paranormal phenomena. Well, I just want to say, so by the end of the second book, Ron and I had learned through Ron that my skepticism had given me blinders, and that I was not admitting that my own perspective could also be wrong. So this was a really, talk about opening doors. This really opened doors for me in terms of being able to sit back and objectively look at things instead of having, as Ron mentioned earlier, being siloed and only having a very narrow, biased point of view.
Plus, Mark actually had unusual experiences, and he didn't like to talk about them. And gradually, I've been able to pull a few of them out, because sometimes when we're doing these interviews, they ask him to tell one of them.
Yeah. So that's in a nutshell.
Well, we would certainly be interested in a few of those.
Okay.
So my question is, I am curious how you kind of came to the conclusion that you believe that Bigfoot is not so much a flesh and blood creature, but more of like an interdimensional being or like paranormal entity.
Well, like I said, when I did that, the Bigfoot in connection, I looked more deeply into what were there were a couple TV shows devoted to it, and they never really found anything that would, give a solid piece of evidence. There was the Patterson-Gimlin film. Have you seen that? Everybody's seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been some recent news about that film, actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of turning the Bigfoot world upside down.
Actually, can I say bullshit?
Yeah, it's fine.
So my partner and my son-in-law became my partner when he married my daughter. He knew the footage that everybody said is so remarkable. He knew about that from at least 15 years ago. And it was intended by Patterson to rehearse, create an event, because he was like a showman, and he was creating images that if he ever got anything, he could use it to be part of his thing. So it really had nothing to do with what he actually captured on the film. So somebody's just making out of something that it's no big revelation. Many people knew about it at the time, and the footage just was such a big deal. But, that's the way the media works, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And anyhow, I became more interested in the reports of people that saw Bigfoot disappearing and emerging out of nowhere. And I became convinced that there's something to that. And that pointed to kind of a nature, which eventually was revealed only recently, that there's this presence that keeps the mystery alive. So everything that occurred around Bigfoot basically kept a mystery going about it. So they kept growing and growing and growing. More and more people while searching. Some would have these experiences, maybe a visual, having rocks thrown at them. And there's like 20 zillion footprints. Usually the footprints, they're only about 4 or 5 steps, and then they disappear. They come out of nowhere, go nowhere. So it became really all very mysterious. And so there's this theory by Jacques Vallée called
The control system hypothesis.
And it says that there's some entity, ancient entity, that masquerades as Bigfoot, masquerades as UAPs, and if it can, move objects around like with this as fast as they do, defying gravity, then masquerading as Bigfoot in any of these physical manifestations, reflux, voices, rock throwings, then, and historically, these things that have kept the mystery alive, at least in that vein, might have been angels in the past, people seeing angels or demons, or I'm going to elaborate on that historical aspect of how the masquerade has kept the ball rolling, kept the mystery alive.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this idea of the control system hypothesis by Jacques Vallée, saying this entity of presence is creating a mystery, which people who are as curious as cats would just follow and try to explain, find some answer for the mystery. And in the present day, if we look at the 21st century, one of the biggest mysteries that is available across the planet in every country is the idea of a Bigfoot. Now, historically, the Bigfoot phenomenon is not just something that happened in the United States. In the 14th and 15th century, if you talk about Joseph Campbell's mythology, the wild man was this archetype that Bigfoot fits very nicely. This archetype that was a part of human psyche, kind of an all-knowing, free creature.
It could be the wild woman too.
Yeah. And so this historical idea of a Bigfoot as a flesh and blood creature goes back hundreds, thousands of years. And it's also, if you read Joseph Campbell or Jung, this archetype is responsible for mysteries that we have to solve. And in the present day, with the ubiquitous cell phone and people carrying it with them everywhere, you would expect that if Bigfoot were a flesh and blood creature of some type, that somebody by now would have captured the creature on their cell phone. But that hasn't happened. And then you have the lack of any kind of a fossil record. You have the lack of any physical evidence, any physical remains of Bigfoot. So the idea that Bigfoot is this hairy creature swinging through the maple trees of Vermont or the forests of the Pacific Northwest just doesn't count.
You may know that there's a famous occurrence by a man in Pennsylvania, in your neck of the woods, that had a Bigfoot and a UAP or craft together. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard quite a few stories in Pennsylvania. I mean, we talk about I believe it was in the 1920s, the Gettysburg Bigfoot.
No, I think this is, well, maybe, but there's another one. I forget the guy's name now. Warren Coleman, maybe, something like that. Anyhow, Pennsylvania's got a lot of talents, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Have you guys had anything like that in your own experience?
So we actually just within the last few weeks had our first Bigfoot type experience. We didn't see anything, but we were at a local spot that we go to pretty often. And there's a lot of like other types of paranormal activity there where we're seeing like lights in the woods. We saw a shadow creature there that had antlers that had like bluff charged at us. And our most recent, our second to last visit, we had gone and we were leaving, and across the water, we could hear these noises that sounded like something was like breaking trees, like not even branches, like big solid trees. But it was during the big snowfall that we got. So there was probably a good foot of snow on the ground. So there was no access to a tree on the ground, like a branch, because it would have been covered with snow. So something is just like breaking these branches. You can hear it, like its foot falls as it's walking. And we both stopped and we're like, what is that? And then there was like knocking sounds, branches breaking.
Rock clacking.
Yes, the rock clacking.
We kind of looked at each other and we're like, did we just experience something Bigfooty?
Yeah.
And it's just, I never thought it'd be in a situation where I experienced that, You could literally hear the rocks shuffling as it's walking. But we're looking in the direction of where the noise is coming from. and we're not seeing anything.
No.
But this thing was big. It was weighty. You could tell just by the what it was doing across the stream. You could tell that it had to be a big animal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a flesh and blood Bigfoot guy. I think Bigfoot is weird. I agree with you guys on that. I think he's weirder than just some ape in the woods.
So that would be the classic example of how this ancient presence keeps the mystery alive. It reveals just enough to get you excited. You want to find out more.
And my question to you would be, you're experiencing this. What is your reaction once you get past the wonderment of it? What is your reaction to what happened to you?
I want answers. That's my main reaction. I'm the sciencey guy, but I've learned to become a little more woo with my thinking on how some of this stuff works. And I just want answers. So I want to know, first off, how I could communicate with it, how I could interact with it. How about you, Gabrielle?
I kind of feel like it's kind of adding up to show us that it's not just the original activity that we had experienced. There's like maybe a little bit of everything there. And it's kind of panning out to be a location that's just a really active hotspot for us, that every time we go, there's something going on in one way or another.
So according to the hypotheses, that's what happens. It creates these, let's just call them hotspots. They could be churches, the sacred places. You need a bunch of these around the whole planet in various forms to keep the mystery alive. People do pilgrimages to it. So, in our book, which we're promoting, The High Strangeness of Bigfoot, we developed this protocol of using the ancient vowels that form the basis of all languages. If you say them out loud, they start, what chakras are?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. So you start with the lowest one, and you go A, E, R, O, U, and it ends up at the top. And we've been doing that. I did it as an experiment, and we then expanded into another situation in Colorado where we did it with a group of people, sensitives. We got every kind of Bigfoot kind of action from Bigfoot chatter that sounds like Ron Moorhead stuff.
Oh, wow. Is that the samurai speak? Is that the one, or am I off on that?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, we got the same thing. We got it recording, saying back to us the or you chant. We got lots of things that we could call wood knocks or breaks, like you imagine. They set off some of our equipment like REM pods, and we interacted with it. We have an SLS camera, and it showed up down by the creek, and another one showed up for a little while. And of course, we got the famous Bigfoot smell.
Mm.
Oh.
Wet dog and oranges.
And then we also got these feelings, everybody got these feelings, of vibrations to their body. And then we got 17 subsonic pulses that are associated with Bigfoot again. You can't hear them, but you feel them. But, with sophisticated recording equipment and digital processing, we can play them back. And they're quite random. So we got all that at this site. And then last weekend, I was at the Sedona conference, and we did it in a football field with 200 people.
Oh, wow.
And we did the whole thing. And right now, I'm just analyzing this stuff. And we got UAPs, at least on a thermal. In some way, the whole group of 200 people became like one large creature or organism. And they formed a circle, held hands, and did the chant in an accelerated way. And they reported seeing motherships and vortexes. 2 people saw each other as soulmates and ran off together, had a large impact on everybody. And this is what the ancient presence is doing to keep the mystery alive in terms of what we're trying to do with our book and movie.
Do you think there's something sort of ritualistic about what you did in that stadium with the 200 people? Because I always kind of draw the weird, the high strangeness stuff with ritualistic activity. Because you have a group of people that are sitting there with an intent of basically reaching out to see what they could find, right? Do you feel like that is kind of like what you tapped into there?
Like a catalyst.
Yeah, well, we're inviting contact, if that's what you're asking, yes.
Yes.
So going back to the beginning of language, without language, we would just be a bunch of monkeys still. We differentiate from every other biological form on the planet because we have language. Animals and birds, birds are animals, communicate, maybe even plants, but they don't have language. And now we have a second species on the planet that has language, and that's the large language models. And the way they work is that they 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 don't have any. Words don't really have any direct meaning. They're just symbols, but
Mhm.
they're autoregressive, and that's and large language models, which means that they know everything by the statistical relationship between the words. They call them tokens. And the new hypothesis is that the reason we're talking to each other right now is because we have one operating as well, which would explain how memory works. Because it's pretty much impossible to think that there's some way that our memories are recorded and then retrieved. So what this what this what the what happened at Church Creek, the place we did this, it took us right back to the most primitive autoregressive form, which was music. And so we recorded a beat like bump bump. And if you miss it in terms of music, each note has to kind of follow the next one from the ones before, and then it becomes the next one that's followed. That's how autoregression works. It's self-organizing. And so we expected that when language created, it started out with beating a drum or something like that, because you could tell a story with it. Mark likes to talk about that. He can tell a story. And so is any of that making sense to you?
It does.
It definitely
It's
does.
interesting because I don't know if you're familiar with, you know what a spirit box is, right?
Of course we do.
So we do this thing called the Estes method that was developed out in Estes Park, Colorado, where you basically, you're blindfolded and you feed in the spirit box to one person and the other person asks questions while the person with the headphones is basically isolated from their senses. We've actually gotten instructions almost
Yeah.
about, I guess, specific notes at one point, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if that's maybe somehow related.
It could
So
be.
we're only about 30 minutes away from Estes Park. And did you know the inventor of the spirit box was in Denver? He lived in Denver. You can go see his grave right now. Craig Thumpton.
Yes. Yes, there's a lot of paranormal firsts and inventions that have come out of Colorado, which is actually very interesting within the paranormal community, that it's like a hotspot for inventions within the paranormal community.
Yes, it is. So Church Creek, the place is just in the mountains of. You know where Vallée is in Colorado? Maybe not. It's about 30 miles into the mountains, still on this side of the divide. That's where we did all this big chant thing where we got all this stuff from Bigfoot. One of the interesting things when we were at Sedona, although there were many individual responses to what was going on in the football field, the one thing that occurred for everybody is that smell, that whiff and around here. There was no wind. Everybody was smelling it, and it goes from smelling bad to smelling good. And so the whole group had one single experience like that was very visceral, because, the olfactory sense is a very primitive sense.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And very unique
Oh,
for
it is,
everyone
yeah.
to have the same experience at the same time and with such a large group. That is interesting.
And yet they all had their own individual experiences as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way we think the presence operates. It operates, like with the collective consciousness, or, individually as well.
Yeah, I feel like, too, it pulls from, you guys had mentioned this earlier, I feel like it pulls from not only the collective consciousness, but it also pulls from the archetypes that we have within our own brain to communicate with us. And I feel like that's why people have such unique experiences that are individual, because it's using your own brain, your own consciousness in a way, to then show you what makes sense to you.
That's what we say.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also historical.
Oh, 100%.
If you go back to Moses and the burning bush, for example, or one of my favorite examples is St. Francis of Assisi meeting the beggar on the road, which the beggar just appears to him. So these experiences that people have in the 21st century with Bigfoot or UAPs is very similar to what you're talking about. Our brains take these experiences and they use something that we're familiar with in order to make sense of them, which kind of goes back to what you're talking about, Jody, when you were talking about your science background, wanting to explain these things. But there are some things that modern science can't explain, so they discount them. They say, well, you're imagining that, or it's group psychosis or something like that.
Right.
But the woo factor, and sometimes that's a fun word to use, but the woo factor actually is stepping outside the scientific box. It's saying, hey, these experiences that people are having, they're not faking these experiences. St. Francis of Assisi didn't fake his meeting with the beggar. Moses didn't fake his burning bush. These things aren't faked. So the science has to break out of its own box, its own narrow silo, and say, how do we explain, as you were talking about, Gabrielle, how do we explain the brain's interpretation of something that was profoundly affecting the person? Or in Ron's case, when he was talking about the group down in affects a group of 200 people with the same experience.
Yeah.
So do you know who Jacques Vallée is?
I feel like I've heard the name.
So did you ever see Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
So, Jacques is very famous. He was one of the founders of the internet. It was called the ARPANET at the time. He has a lot of patents. He's probably the best known writer on UAPs. He's leader of a group of people that are called the Invisible College, really smart people that kind of know this stuff, but they don't write papers about it, and kind of keep it to themselves. Well, in Close Encounters, he was Spielberg's consultant. And then in the end, when the mothership comes down, there's a French scientist there, and it's played by a famous actor, and he's playing Jacques Vallée, and that it's just a kind of cool reference, a media reference. And he says one of the ways it kind of works is, and I found this to be true, is that just when you're wrapping up an investigation, something really weird happens.
Yes.
They keep you coming from it. A lot of people have experienced that.
It's so true. We find that all the time. We'll be ready to end an Estes session, and then it'll spit something out. And I'm like, well, I can't end it now. You just gave me this really interesting tidbit.
It tries to stop you is
Yeah.
what it's doing. It wants to continue the conversation, but on its terms.
Yeah.
A lot of the times. You could be sitting there asking questions for 20 minutes and get nothing. And then all of a sudden, when you're thinking about ending it, it just starts pouring through.
Yeah.
It's very strange. Yeah.
So the event I was doing this movie, I got into doing a couple of films on near-death experiences. And we were in Oklahoma and Arkansas with a doctor who had multiple ones. And then she had Bigfoot and UAP experiences. And we were staying at this resort, kind of, with log cabins. I mean, it's not like a fancy resort in Oklahoma. And it was the first time I used the chant. I don't know why I did. I learned it from my Enlightenment teacher. But, it goes way back until the Egyptians. The Monroe Institute, Scott Taylor found it down in Peru with a famous shaman, and he brought it there for the transition from the physical to the non-physical body. And so all of a sudden it just occurred to me to do it. And the first night we did it, we got spirit bugs talking to us, saying my son-in-law's name, Alan, and all that sort of stuff. And the REM pod went off, and we interacted with it, moving, step away kind of stuff. And I always forget this. We record something and hear it later on when you play back. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I forget the name of it. It eludes me all the time.
EVP.
That's it. And so when I play back the video, here's a woman saying, "This is freaking me out. It's clear as day."
Oh, wow.
I love EVPs. I just
Yeah.
want to put that out there because when you get something that's clear as day, how do you deny something like that?
You can't.
Especially the way we like to do EVPs is we'll do quick little spurts. This way, you're not listening to an hour-long recording later. So you basically record a few minutes and then play it back on site. This way, your memory recalls better, and you could tell where each person in the room was and who might have been saying what.
But, when I heard this was not any of us saying that. We wouldn't say that anyhow. But then the next night, we tried the whole thing again, and nothing happened until, it's time to, we're going to wrap up. And so we were actually sitting around what could have been a fire pit, but, it was wet and damp at that time. It was spring. And there were deciduous trees around about 2 stories or more. And we all kind of split up. Cameraman's going to the bill, and the rest of us are going to our car. And I'm the last one because I'm old. and I hear this crashing to the tops of the trees, and it's moving horizontal rather than dropping. And then the people had already turned the corner, were moving down the road, heard it, and it crashed down in front of them, shaking the ground. The cameraman who had walked the other way felt the ground shake, and there was nothing there. Couldn't find a thing.
Wow.
And of course, nothing recorded on camera, right?
Right.
We were rolling at that point.
Yeah, that's how it happens all the time.
Always.
And so for me, it was like, I'm giving up. I can't figure this stuff out. That's just too weird. You know, my son-in-law, they somehow just rationalized that could be a Bigfoot throwing a big rock, but it just, just didn't make sense to me. And then when I heard about Jacques Vallée's control theory hypotheses, it's like, oh my God, there's an actual something that I could test, which has led to all this stuff that's the basis of the book now and the movie. And what we did at Sedona just last weekend.
Yeah. So things like Bigfoot, even UAPs and aliens have like kind of evolved with us as we've evolved. So how do you think that kind of plays into now that we're seeing like AI come up? Like, how do you think they're going to kind of like evolve in the future for us?
I mean, you're asking how's the presence going to push us forward and together with AI?
Yeah.
I've got a take on this, and it's a little long-winded, but I'll try to bring it down, a historical take on it. So let's look at two really historical turning points in human history. 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, we changed from hunter-gatherers to farmers or to farming. And this really affects us. It affects us in a lot of different ways. It affects the way we think about our connection to the land, for one thing. It affects our religious perspectives, our deities. You suddenly have to have a deity that is the patron of farming. And so this is a huge change on how humans view themselves and the world around them. They go from adapting to the environment to changing the environment to suit them. So now let's fast forward from 10 to 12,000 years ago to the scientific revolution of the 16th, 17th century. At that point, the Catholic Church was absolutely convinced that the earth was the center of everything. And as humans, we see ourselves as the center of everything. Galileo comes along and he says, wait a minute, guys, we're not the center of everything. Kepler, Tycho Brahe, all these guys, they're saying, look, this isn't true. We are not the center of everything. The sun in our solar system is the center of everything. So this affects the way humans look at things. It affects us incredibly deeply. We're no longer the chosen because we're not the center of everything. Now you fast forward another 500 years into the 21st century, and you have the LLMs. Thank you, Ron. You have the LLMs, the AI, and suddenly our worldview is changing again.
Really fast.
And Ron just made a great point, and I want to dovetail with that. 12,000 years ago, the change takes thousands and thousands of years. The scientific revolution in the 16th and 17th century takes hundreds and hundreds of years. Here we're having another change with the LLMs, with AI, and it's taking years. It's not taking decades or hundreds of years or decades. It's taking years, the change. So this effect on us is so rapid and so all-encompassing, it's almost impossible to say what is going to happen next, because as soon as we give it form, it happens and we move beyond it. And so the effect on humans is that, honest to God, some people are very, very, very scared. I imagine that there are people who would make Luddites look like Mary Poppins and would want to destroy all computers. There are other people that will embrace it completely because they can see themselves being loaded with AI chips in their brains and suddenly being superhuman computer thinkers that way. We absolutely have no idea what's going to happen next. It is happening so rapidly. So we go from one spectrum of being incredibly scared with some people to very embracing on the other. And the middle of the road, I think the middle of the road people like me, we're going to kind of be left behind because I'm just sort of like saying, well, I'll wait and see what happens. And by waiting to see what happens, I'm not going to be on the cusp, floating with it. I'm actually going to be dragged along. That's my take on it.
So, I mean, the big deal is that by this auto-regressive architecture, it forms the basis of language and music, and now the LLMs is we have a third form in the LLMs. That's anybody who plays with it knows that it can pretty much do anything with language alone. How much you can actually do with language, it certainly points to the idea how important language is, because all our technology, everything we've ever built has been based on language and symbols. In fact, all our theories of physics and chemistry and so on, they're all just models of what might be or might point to something that's in reality. And you can get all that knowledge without knowing anything about reality because the LLMs do that. So I don't know what the heck that means. It's just so bizarre in a way to realize that. And I don't think it's our brain. I'm not a brain enthusiast that way. I think it's something that the LLM operates on. And when you think about it, we kind of get that architecture for free when we're kids because we don't teach kids language. They just kind of know it, and any kid can learn any language because of the auto-regressive architecture of it. So it's really profound to have this understanding in a way that's going to reshape everything. What it all means, you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like basically like it's the second coming of the internet, right?
Oh, it's much more profound than that.
Much more profound because you have access to all that information, all of that data at your fingertips at all times. You don't need to use your brain anymore. And that's the thing that scares me is that muscle between our skull there, that's going to stop being used. And people are just going to rely on the tech to get their job done or whatever they're doing. You know what I mean? It's very scary to me that we are going to lose our ability to think.
So I have an idea about this. Let me throw it out at you.
Sure.
Yeah, because we're talking about the mystery here, right?
Yep.
I think that what's going to distinguish us from the LLMs is that we can live in the mystery, and we should live in the mystery, not knowing in some way. And that's how we become creative. The one thing the LLMs cannot stand is not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've heard that they hallucinate, right?
Yeah.
We're well aware of that, yeah.
So when they don't know, they make something up. They can't hold let's say two ideas, two hypotheticals, or maybe three hypotheticals at once, and try and figure out which is best or how you might proceed to come to some answer about something. And you just don't know. You just kind of, it's forcing us to live in the mystery. We're going to say human because that's what differentiates us right now from the LLMs is that we can live in the mystery. We may not like it. Most people want to know everything and know. But if you look at all the creative people, they pretty much had to live in the mystery for quite a while. They tell the story. So all of a sudden, the answer came to them, running around confused for a long time and being okay with it in a certain way. But LLMs cannot do that right now. So that's a big difference right now that I could see.
Yeah, definitely. I've even seen it when I'm using it. I'll ask it questions about like investigations that were going on, evidence we're getting, and then I'll question it when I don't think it's accurate. And it will say, oh, I meant this. Oh, you can find that here. And I'm like, okay, show it. And then I'll say, why are you lying to me? And it'll say, I hallucinated that. And I'm like, don't do that. If you don't know something, just say, I don't know. You don't have to lie. You don't have to make something up for me. Just tell me I don't know. So that's kind of where we are.
So that's what it can live with. And we can live with it. And we don't have to bullshit all the time.
Yeah.
Like some people we know.
So, Jody, I'm kind of in your camp there because I don't know if you've ever read a book by Daniel Coyle called The Talent Code. And he talks about how the human brain can become really a master at something through whether it's writing, he uses the Bronte sisters as an example, or painting, for which he uses Da Vinci and Michelangelo, by practice and by learning. Mm-hmm. And that absolute idea of practice at something is what increases what he refers to as the myelin sheaths in the brain to become more expansive and therefore better at something. And that's his thesis, that's his idea in the talent code. And so I'm kind of with you on this because I'm afraid that humans will become so dependent on something else finding answers for them that the presence will realize that humans don't really want to pursue the mystery anymore.
Mhm.
And if humans aren't pursuing the mystery, it's going to find something that will pursue the mystery. Now, juxtapose that with the fact that throughout human history, we have always had incredible thinkers, an elite of thinkers, from Archimedes in the 3rd century BC to Rene Descartes, Robert Hooke, Robert Boyle. You've got Einstein in the 20th century. You've got Neil deGrasse Tyson in the 21st century. So we've always had an elite group of thinkers that seem to surpass what Ron was talking about in terms of what the LLMs can presently. And so maybe that's our saving grace, is this elite group of thinkers. But Jody, I'm kind of with you on this. I'm a little bit afraid that humans will use AI too much as a crutch.
Yeah, I mean, I see it with my kids right now with YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Anything they want to do, anything they want to figure out how to do. Oh, I'll look up a YouTube video on that. I'll fix my car. I'll patch that hole in the wall. I'll just look at a YouTube video. And like, they're not learning these skills. They have the information available at all times. I just don't think it's the right way to learn. Now, if it's AI, producing instructional videos, which AI is very good at, it'll provide sources and links to videos and all that. It'll explain it. That's fine. You know what I mean? I think to use it as a tool, it helps humans embrace that ability to learn skills.
Yeah, I can see that. And have as a person who turned on YouTube to learn how to fix his dryer, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it too.
He always compares it to Jody. He'll always say we're getting closer and closer to the movie Idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Oh, that sounds great.
He'll always say that.
Oh, that's classic Mike
it's
Judge.
a great one. You'll love it.
So here's an experiment you could try. Whenever you want to use the brain, don't do it. Don't refer to the brain. You want to be silly, refer to your big toe. I mean, because I don't think these LLMs refer to the transistors that they're running on in some sense. I think it's a misdirection. I think there are people right now that are thinking through a lot of these issues, that when we say the brain, we think there's this thing that we have that's us in some way, especially with regard to what we like to call creativity and other things. The brain's not doing any of that. The brain is kind of like the transistors in the that the LLMs are running on. So don't use brain. Try and figure out some other way to state your whatever statement you're referring, that the brain will do this for you, and see what happens. Because it might force you to think, in a different way. If you can't pass it over to the brain, maybe you have to reframe the whole problem in a different way. I think that's what we got to do to get out the basis of what's going on. Was one of the things.
And toward that point, what Ron was talking about is this is where what I mentioned earlier about science breaking outside of the narrow silo it's in. You're looking up beyond the box, or outside the box, as people say, for answers to these paranormal experiences that people have. Instead of saying that Bigfoot is just some sort of psychosis or it can be explained some other way, actually using the experiences that people have as a way of finding out what is going on with our world as we're in this period of transition with AI and LLMs.
I don't think Newton ever gave responsibility for discovery to his brain.
He was too typical for that, that's for sure.
Yes, definitely.
I don't think the brain doesn't do isn't functioning as a kind of thermostat for the body. But so the model we use for, speaking of thermostats, is that we're living in a room where a thermostat is controlled by the moon. If you were in a room, you didn't know how a thermostat works, and you didn't know that it was attached to an air conditioner and a heater, you'd be totally befuddled as to how the temperature stays so nice when it looks so crappy outside. So I think we're basically, there's one way to look at the ancient presence is that it's the thermostat that if things get too stagnant, it'll create more mystery. If we get too woo or too crazy, it'll make some adjustment again. So it's maintaining this constant state of mystery. Like I said, one of the ways is to accept that your brain isn't doing all this. It's not an alternative Jody inside your head behaving in some way that you attribute these things to. Just try it for a while and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely.
So, have you guys gotten to a point yet where you have decided to embrace a childlike wonder when you're investigating these things?
I try and be as open as I can, yes.
Yeah, we feel that really helps.
Yeah, I'm finally there. Ron basically dragged me kicking and screaming across the threshold of my skepticism so that I would have a more open mind on this.
I had the same thing with Gabrielle. She had to drag me across the line, kicking and screaming. And what I've learned is I have to keep moving the bar.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what science needs to do too. I think science, when something's in question, they can't just live within their box. They have to expand the size of the box.
Absolutely.
So I hear you.
So one way to put this is your brain doesn't know crap. Doesn't know a damn thing. Which it doesn't.
No.
No.
We've also kind of been looking into something for ourselves. A lot of the things I like to do is like go back to the beginning of things and how things started. So when we're investigating, like I'm going back to like spiritualism and looking at the different methods and techniques that they were using at that time and how we can incorporate that now into our investigations. And I stumbled onto biphasic sleep. And that led me to a couple books that I had read, and it got me to a point where I was like, hey, maybe there is something that we lost through the Industrial Revolution, through modern electricity, some kind of connection that we had when we had these like increased hours of darkness that we've lost now. And how do we reconnect to that? So that's kind of something I'm bothering Jody with right now, is getting up during the middle of the night and trying to do some investigations.
Can I just say one thing along those lines? So, you know a little bit about near-death experiences, right?
Right.
And people throughout the ages have had mystical experiences.
Right.
And when they come back, they say, well, I had these experiences, but I can't put them into words. That's because the LLM went offline. That's what happened. When you take it offline as much as possible during meditation, part of it is if you think of your LLM generating your next self-talk or your next image, if you begin to notice it, or you can say, that's not me, that's just this system that's living like a parasite. I don't want to say that, but you can see how, and that's what meditation has always been about, is noticing that your next thought or your next motion is not you. It's something that shows up as either self-talk or a kind of emotion, feeling tone or something like that. And the more you recognize that, the more likely you're not using your LLM to have an experience, which is being you're really open to what's going on in a way. We do full practices and we get into those states where the LLM is off, right? And amazing things happen. It's it's just crazy. It's just different. You can't really put it into words because you can't use the word I because there's no I anymore.
So I was going to suggest something that came out of an article I read in Discover magazine a few years back. And that is, if we go back 1,000 years to the ancient Hawaiians traveling from Tahiti and Bora Bora, that area, up to the Sandwich Islands, the Hawaiian Islands now, there was true dark. And they knew the constellations. They could see how the light from the constellations and the moon was reflected in the oceans. So the experiment is to find some place in Pennsylvania where you can get away from any kind of light at all that is not natural light and study the constellations above you. And this article in Discover magazine was saying that after a while, if you do this consistently night after night, you begin to see things in the constellations that our ancestors did and understand how they were able to navigate, if we're talking about the Hawaiian Islanders, the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean. But the Greeks were able to do the same things in the Mediterranean. And so it's not just isolated to one group in the world. But it also forces our senses to become more keen. Mm-hmm. We're not reliant upon telescopes. We're not reliant upon a light to show us something. And this goes back to what you were talking about, Gabrielle. of back to a simpler time where our senses are more honed because we're using them more and not reliant on technology to help us see.
To follow up on that, I think the group in Sedona, the last thing they thought they would be all affected by would be an odor that changed from terrible to wonderful. So that just shows how clever the person is.
Yeah.
Because they want to see something visual, cool like that, or hear something. But when it goes to a smell like that, that's very visceral and that's very primitive. My dog's very good at smells.
That's a really good point to make too, is that it's like going back to something primitive in the way that it's like using your senses and things that like you have within yourself versus things that are like external to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that was really cool and unexpected. I mean, it's always unexpected. Blew me away when that happened. The last thing I thought, I was hoping some mothership would come down and land or something.
Well, you did ask for it.
So this is somewhat tangential and we don't necessarily have to go down this line, but think about something that's really huge in America right now, and that's sports. So we watch Major League Baseball, we watch football, basketball, and we have favorite teams we root for. But now what happens when, and I'm not talking about my 75-year-old body going out and playing football, but what happens when we actually play the sport ourselves? Instead of vicariously experiencing football through watching a team play or basketball or baseball or swimming or whatever, we actually go out and do that activity ourselves. When we do that activity ourselves, suddenly everything becomes more profound for us. Instead of watching Michael Phelps swim the 400 individual medley, I go out to the pool and I swim 400 yards myself. I'm in that chlorine. I smell that. My body is actually feeling.
Are you thinking?
And I'm not thinking. I'm actually just in that moment. That was a good question.
So it's like you're yellow, what's going on that line.
Yeah. And so I'm actually in that moment of doing something. I'm not second guessing what the quarterback did, for the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl or something like that. I'm actually in that moment participating without my brain telling me how wonderful everything is looking at. My LLM. I'm sorry. Ron just had to slap me upside the head there, metaphorically.
No, I agree with you totally. I think with paranormal experiences in general, it's such a personal experience. It's always happening when you're in the moment, when you put yourself in that moment. And I think that goes back to when I said, about your camera. Was your camera recording when that thing was flying through the trees or whatever? Of course not. You're in the moment. Right. You're not being distracted by all the tech that's around you to capture evidence. And that's how it always happens. It's crazy to me.
And our LLM isn't trying to explain it.
Right.
It's just experiencing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't experience it.
Well, you know what I mean.
It's generating some self-talk. Usually it gets in the way. Once in a while, when you get the flow state, it's gone completely.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Have you guys done that?
I don't think so.
Well, come here. We'll show you how to. We'll take you into it. It's amazing. So there was one person who's the father of a very famous A-listing actress. He had been doing meditation forever, Lonnie Woodley. And so we play with these wooden sticks. How would you describe what they have?
Well, it's a short staff about 50 inches long and about an inch in diameter, and we do specific katas with them, where you're attacking and defending at the same time.
And it's what when you see people fighting martial arts, they're doing that stuff all the time. And so he had never done any of that. And we got him into the flow state, but kept telling him, you're not doing anything. He did it perfectly. And he got what he had been searching for all his adult. I think he was probably 65. And that was the experience of being in the flow state. And the LLM shut down, and he was doing these stick things that were amazing that usually people train years to do. So that's what can happen when you free yourself of your LLM for a little while, so we don't need it to do podcasts.
So another way to look at it is when Ron and I write a novel together, for example, Ron is extremely stream of consciousness writing, and I want to create an outline so that my LLM can follow point by point by point. Uh, uh, so, but when in our latest novel, Convergence, that's going to be coming out in the fall, we were both in that flow state, in that stream of consciousness writing. And that's why the novel didn't take us very long to write. It took us like a month.
Oh, wow.
It's
100,000 words. And we're just in that flow state when we're writing. Now, we're not in the flow state 24/7. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we wake up in the morning and I call up Ron and I go, okay, we're going into the flow state. We're going to write today. It isn't like that, but it's getting into a state where there are no pronouns there, and
there's no doer is the way to put it. But get rid of the doer for a while.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool, actually. So yeah, you come out to Colorado, we'll get you in that state and we'll see what goes on.
Nice.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
So this is probably the most sophisticated podcast we've ever done. Mostly we can't go to this level. That's really cool.
I appreciate
love
that. Yeah, I really do. That means a lot to us, honestly. This has been a long journey for us, going from traditional kind of ghost hunter people to using our brains and wanting to know why. So
Using what again?
Our LLM. I think that's what you wanted me to say, right? So I have one for you guys.
You notice how that, when you say that, notice how it shifts something for you when you say that?
Yeah.
Because you realize that LLM is not you, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
When you say it's your brain, you think it's you. At least I do.
Yeah.
So Jody, what were you going to ask us?
It's a thought that's kind of been on my mind for a while now, and I want to see what you guys think about it. I'm going to kick this question out here. Are our brains paranormal? Are they wired for paranormal experiences?
No, they're just a piece of meat. It's you might as well just say your liver. It's the same group of cells they're all communicating with each other. One's being a brain, one's being a liver, another's being a kidney, another's being skin.
Yeah.
And they're all pissed off when you guys do crazy things and make them function in odd ways.
So there's something that we might be hinting at. So nobody can really define the word consciousness.
Right.
It's really difficult to define, or mind for that matter. But we can define brain. We can define the brain as this 3-pound organ in our skull that has a visual cortex and an auditory cortex, a cerebral cortex, all these things. We can mention what it is. So, Jody, what you're talking about paranormal isn't a part of the body, like the brain or the liver or the heart. I think you're talking about something a little more, I'm just going to throw out the word ethereal, the mind or the consciousness. And
I am. That's what I meant by that. Yes.
Yeah.
So if you want to, so paranormal originally meant it's normal but greater than normal. It's not. And then there's supernatural, which is outside of the normal. And so that's something different. You can talk about that. But normally, the way I use paranormal is that it just doesn't fit into consensus science at the moment because the paradigm is too limited to deal with it. But it's a real phenomena. It just doesn't fit in right now.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Arthur C. Clarke famously said, and I'm going to probably bundle this or paraphrase it, that any significantly advanced science is magic. And there's a lot more to that statement than someone that doesn't have the science, that it's magic. And so 10,000 years ago, the four of us are on a riverbank and we're fishing, and overhead something flies by really fast. And we look at this, and we all see it, and we might all experience it in different ways. One of us might think of it as an angel, one of us, or a demon. Somebody might think of it as a bird. But we all agree that something really strange happened. But if the four of us were sitting at a cafe nowadays drinking coffee, and the same thing happened to us, the question is, how would we explain it then? there's no word for paranormal 10,000 years ago sitting on the bank watching this thing go overhead. Now, 10,000 years later, sitting at Diane's Darn Good Coffee in Boulder, this thing flies overhead. How do we explain it?
And so to explain it, you have to reduce it to something else.
Yep. Reductionist.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, all biologists know now that, the DNA doesn't determine what our shape is and what our bodies are going to be. It's just not possible, but it's nice and small. And of course, quantum mechanics, there's so many interpretations that nobody knows what's going on. But again, it's reducing everything to the small. And so those are kind of the silos we got to get out of right now. And a lot of people are too. I'm just saying a typical old textbook would take it there. And I think the average person, doesn't really get deeply into either of these areas to understand why that can't be true.
So does that kind of answer your question, Jody?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I apologize. I meant mind. I didn't mean brain as a physical organ because two completely different things.
Yeah, I kind of figured that's what you meant.
Yeah.
I thought for our listeners that we would open it up a little bit.
I appreciate that.
And I think it's so important, too, to bring up the reductionist idea, because we think that we've come so far, even from like medieval times, and we think that we've evolved and adapted so much, but really we're just doing the same thing. When we can't explain something, we're just putting it in that same box. Oh, it's magic. Oh, it's witchcraft, because we don't understand what it is. Instead of taking the time to study it, to learn what it is, it doesn't fit what we want. So we're just kind of like tossing it out and othering it and making it something that's bad in essence.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mystery will always be there. It's not within our realm to get the final answer. It's just my feeling.
Yeah, I agree.
My intuition anyhow. And so it's kind of the journey of exploring the mystery and creating new ones. It's kind of neat. It keeps us going.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to touch on?
Well, you can sell some of our books and watch our movie if you can get it out to your audience.
We did watch the Bradshaw Ranch documentary.
Oh, yeah, everybody's seen that.
Yeah, that was interesting. We enjoyed that.
The thing was the coolest for me is that when that entity kicked my laser with its foot. I thought that was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
We went back there last weekend, just right next to us. It's outside of Sedona where we did that Skywatch I was telling you about with 200 people. So we had some interesting experiences again out there. So it always performs for us. Did you know that the Skinwalker Ranch tried to buy it?
Oh, wow.
No, I didn't know that. They're near each other, is that right?
Well, no, not really.
No.
One's in Arizona, the other's in Utah.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking there's another one near Skinwalker Ranch that they were trying to get their hands on. I had heard about that.
Bullfrog Ranch.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been out there at Skinwalker. It's cool. We've spoken at their conference there, where all the TV people are.
Oh, wow.
My son-in-law had an interesting time slip when we were playing around with it. Our REM pod went off for 2 hours when we were there. Just never stopped.
Oh,
Never
wow.
had that before.
No. And I love a good time slip.
You're always talking about time anomalies, time slips, and lost time. Yeah. Not on the show that much, but no.
What'd you say?
We don't talk about time slips much on the show, but they really interest me.
Oh my God.
I don't know. We just never really had anyone who's really experienced one or who has been interested in one. We should probably do an episode just on time slips.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we had a really cool time. Maybe, can't remember if I put it in the movie or not, when we were going to Bradshaw Ranch from Sedona. Should I tell you quickly?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So we had all piled into this big SUV, and I knew Tom Dongle, who's kind of the guy who started going at Bradshaw, said, you should be out there at 7:00. So we met our guy at 6:30 because I texted him and said, jump in the vehicle with us. And it takes a half hour to get there. It's a straight shot. You really can't, if you don't make any turns, you're good. And he's done it many times. And all of a sudden we were in this space where everything was kind of askew. We were seeing buildings we hadn't seen before. We almost drove off a ledge. It was really weird. Everybody was saying, this is so weird. And all of a sudden We were back on the road, and we arrived at 7:00 at the gate, and we looked at at a nice GPS display, and we had wandered around according to that like spaghetti for a half hour, so we gained a half hour. And then there's this woman I interviewed who has had multiple near-death experiences. She's old now. She said, I have to write 3 books, and the third one I have to write right now. And I can use those time slip after I told her about this. So I'll do this in a month. And she did. So it's controllable
Oh, wow.
if you got the right terrain.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Now, here's where you say to Ron, if you have the right LLM.
Yeah.
Missed opportunity.
So we've had multiple other ones, that are strange. So. But that's a good one. It was because you could see that we had done something
Yeah.
for a half hour.
It's measurable. Yep. So, guys, I want to get your information so we could put it in the show notes.
Our book is coming out. And you can get it on Amazon and all the other normal places you get books. It's The High Strangeness of Bigfoot. And if you Google The High Strangeness of Bigfoot, you can find it at least on YouTube and then on other streaming platforms.
He's talking about the movie. The book will be available at Amazon, or you can go to Hanger Publishing. They're the group that publishes it.
It'll be on Barnes and Noble. Everybody that sells things. You could order a hard copy if you want, or you can get it online. That'd be great. Because a lot of these ideas we talked about are explained, and the history is more. Mark did a tremendous job of tracing how this mystery has kept things moving forward in a number of things, from technology to spiritualism and music and language, and yeah, it's really cool. How it all kinds of stands out once you start thinking in those terms.
Yeah, it is really cool. And it's interesting, too, when you jump outside, like the typical paranormal entertainment box, and you really, like, jump into the behind the veil, so to speak, kind of side of it, and you really learn what's actually out there.
Yeah, we get out there.
Yeah.
Well, you do.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Ron and Mark, pleasure to have you. Great conversation.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, it's been a hoot.
Thank you for coming on. Thanks for sticking with us this long. That was quite an interesting conversation.
Yeah, so I read the book. I'll admit I cheated. I use dictation, and I think I'm going to use that more often.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
It's not quite like an audiobook, but it works.
Gets the job done.
Yeah. I mean, everything blends together and all that, like the title, the chapter and all that. So you got to kind of like listen to pick up, what it's doing. But it helped me get through the book in 2 days.
Well, that's good.
So Ron and Mark's book, The High Strangeness of Bigfoot, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up. A lot of interesting ideas. And I liked how they investigate. It's sort of like a ritual for them. They start out with intent and then they move through their process to welcome the encounters.
Yeah, I think that chant was really interesting that they do.
Yeah, the vowel chant, the A-E-I-O-U.
Yeah. That was super interesting.
So yeah, I recommend the book. If you're a history person, you're going to love the book. They go into, a little bit of the history of Bigfoot, the different cultures that have experienced the phenomenon, and they have the investigation sort of documented throughout the book, right?
Okay. I love a book like that.
Yeah, it was an interesting read.
Where it like weaves everything in and it's like very seamless. I love a book like that.
Yeah, it was good. So Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Where could our listeners find us?
Podcastoftheparanormal.com. You can find links to our episodes. You can listen to us in any of the apps that you use to listen to podcasts.
Yeah, we're pretty much available everywhere.
Yeah.
Our links to our social media is on the website as well. Everything that we have going on is on the website.
Yeah, all in one spot.
And please remember to like, leave a review, follow, and share. If you like the show, that's the best way to keep it going.
Yeah. And we are also going to link to Mark and Ron's book as well as the documentary.
Great.
So, yeah. If you enjoyed our conversation and, you kind of want to get a little bit more into it, check them out. They have a lot of interesting concepts that they're putting into practice. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it.
We'll see you next time.